you would go to heaven or to hell. And so that's where we are right now. We're in limbo. But we're on our way to the promised land. Because our ancestors, because don't let them fool you. AI does not mean artificial intelligence. AI means ancestral intelligence. Because that's what artificial intelligence is. It is the collection of all knowledge and wisdom that has ever existed. And it's put in a machine. Ancestral intelligence is when all information that has ever existed, will exist, and exists now is put in your mind. And all you got to do is call on it. And our ancestors are there for you.
Yes, sir, Baba. Seeing you in Tuskegee, right? The other day, back to your roots.
Yeah, man.
You know, in the South. Growing up, you know, I used to spend time in the country all the time on ranches, around horses, things like that. But, you know, we got people that's from New York who have roots down south, people on the West Coast. Why is that so important to always try to come back home to our roots?
You know, what was interesting is I read a book and much regard to our brother Marcel, who has spoken about this. But I read a book by a brother named Charles Blow, and he wrote a book titled The Devil That You Know. And so I bought a synopsis of the book online, and I read it, and he talked about the Great Migration.
Right.
The migration that I think the dates are like somewhere 1917 to 1971. There was large migrations of people from the South going north. And of course, that was so that they could steal the land. So if they got you up north,
Right.
then they just took your farms and things that you had. And they put in the minds of those that were traveling, because according to where you are was where you went, because a lot of times you had family. Some would go to Los Angeles, some went to New York, some went to Boston, Blue Hill Avenue. Chicago, yeah. Okay. And they were made to believe that it was better. You know, the black folk were treated better. And, you know, my daddy came up in the late 30s from Tuskegee, Alabama, up to New York. He stayed with his aunt. My father used to always tell stories during the civil rights movement about Northerners that would go down south and be lecturing Southerners about how to act. You know, you don't have to take that. And, you know, the people down south used to laugh because they say, you know, they come down there doing all this talking. They don't know that they're around worse racists than we are. Because at least the white folk down here let you know. And they'll tell you the truth. That's what Malcolm said. During the election, Malcolm said that he had more respect for the senator who ran for president, Goldwater, Barry Goldwater. He had more respect for Barry Goldwater than he did for Lyndon Johnson, because at least Barry Goldwater tell you the truth.
Sure. Yep.
He let you know the boundaries, and under those conditions, then you set your boundaries. So you let them know where you coming from. And so this great migration took place, and part of my real desire to come back, and yesterday went to Tuskegee and applied for a birth certificate of my father, and Booker T. Coleman Sr., and also went to a place called Franklin, right outside Tuskegee, that's where he lived. You know, and I wanted to walk the path that he walked on. And it was a path yesterday, I'm telling you. But it was quite an experience for me as a Northerner. New York, man, I grew up in a project, right across from Lincoln Center, Amsterdam houses, okay? And many of my friends, their families came from North Carolina, South Carolina. In the Bronx, a lot of people from the Carolinas are in the Bronx. So I lived around a lot of them that went home for the summer vacation, things like that. But Charles Blow talks about the fact that if you really want black power, consider going into 6 states. Now, I'm going to combine this with what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad told us as it relates to get states that you control. Yeah. And so when you look at the idea of returning back Louisiana, as far north as Maryland, Alabama, okay, the Carolinas, There's a lot of black folk. Mississippi is the largest state of black folk. More black folk in Mississippi than any other state in the 50. And so if we were to do that and go into our own, become our own senators, we would up the amount of black senators immediately, Congress people immediately. We would up, and by the way, when you run in the state, when you run in certain things, you don't have to ask nobody for reparations. They give you reparations. Something we can do. This is doable. And if you're up north, and if you work as let's say you work as a custodial engineer, let's say you work in an office building, let's say why not just go down south and get the job down there? And then to create the safe havens for our people and for our children. And so what I'm looking at, maybe not in my lifetime, but I will begin the process of thinking on that level and coming here and promoting, because you're already here, so I don't have to tell you to go south. But I'm telling other people from all around the country, you need to start to think about this. You need to start thinking about what Brother Marcel is telling us and what Brother Charles Blow is telling us in his book, The Devil That You Know. That, look, you ain't going to get the kind of land up north. I ain't going to get no farm in New York. But I can get it down here. I can buy land down here. I can combine forces with people down here. And then, of course, what I wanted to share with you, one of the things I want to share with you is that as an educator, I got our own curriculum. This is our curriculum. If somebody said to me, well, what would you teach the children when you get them in class? This is the curriculum that I would teach them. This is something that I've worked on since 1987, when I went to Kemet for the second time. I went to Mexico with Dr. Van Sertima in 84. And I went to Egypt with Dr. Ben twice. This summer, I'm going to co-host a tour going back to Egypt, Kemet. And this is the curriculum that everybody's going to get. Because when we go to work. And I'm going to show you the science and the math of our ancestors. I'm going to show it to you so that when you go and you stand before the pyramids, you understand what went into those, building that. All those millions of bricks. When we go down to Luxor, I'm going to show you things about the Grand Lodge of Luxor in math and science. Because we got to get back academically to where we were. Our people were geniuses. We taught them what they know. And so we got to come back. And I think that if we could relocate to a place that was friendlier for us in some of the states that is located where we are as a people, there would be strength. We would run things. And everything that you see happening is because of that. When you see what's happening in Florida, they are frightened of what's happening. They're even telling you that. When they say you ain't going to have a country no more. But that's just trying to scare them. Because I got news for them. You ain't got this country. Because if it wasn't for us, this country would fall. We don't know that because we keep thinking that they've given us. So that going back home, walking the path of my father, I know a lot about my mother's family from Boston. Yesterday was the first time I set foot in Alabama. Wow. First time I set foot in Tuskegee, toward Tuskegee University. Dr. Clark used to always tell me that because my name was Booker Taliaferro, named after my father named after Booker T. Washington, my father used to always, Dr. Clark used to always tell me that, you know, Booker T. Washington was one of the most misunderstood men in history. Everybody, myself included, we perceived him as an Uncle Tom, okay? But we didn't know what that brother was doing. That was the original brother that sat at the, who was the spook who sat by the classroom door. I'm just trying to relive what he did and watch what he did. And what he did in Tuskegee. And let me tell you something, there's a lot of great people that have crossed our paths in life. We have the phenomenal work of W.E.B. Du Bois. We have the phenomenal work of someone such as Marcus Garvey. But what Booker T. Washington did is still here and flourishing. And that's very important to understand. What your legacy is, what people will talk about, you can go out and you can buy Du Bois's books, which are phenomenal pieces of literature. I mean, Souls of Black Folks, the Reconstruction, the World in Africa. I mean, he was a phenomenal thinker and producer, okay? Not taking anything away. I'm looking at it from an analytical perspective. Marcus Garvey was creating chapters in places he never went. Ain't no internet, scarce radio, no TV, no cars, no airplanes. How did he get the word out across the globe? Phenomenal. Created the Universal Negro Improvement Association. But Booker T. Washington's legacy still exists and is flourishing. It went from an institute to a university. And so having that experience and just the years of conversations in my family, of my family in Tuskegee, it was just a phenomenal experience. Met two brothers, got some pictures up on my Instagram page. Met two brothers. One brother is building homes in Franklin. Another brother is digging water wells. Because no matter what you build, ain't no house, no city can survive without a source of water. One of the first things you do before you create a city is find your source of water. And so those two brothers combined can create a city right there. They can create something and they can become their own mayors, their own House of Representatives, and all the rest of that right there because they got it going on because they are building. The brother got land in Costa Rica. He going next week to build some homes in Costa Rica.
Wow.
Okay? This is what this brother's doing. And so I think that with the many things that we can bring back to the South with what we've experienced, my lane is a school because I want to create charter schools on the campus of Tuskegee Institute. I want to create charter schools on the campus of Morehouse and Spelman and Clark Atlanta. I also want to start HBCUs in South Central Bronx, in Detroit. The reason why they're all down south is, of course, because of the nature. This is where our home is. This is where black folk were. But now that we're all around the United States, I want to create an HBCU in Hawaii. They got black people in Hawaii. In fact, the first people in Hawaii were black, known as the Lapita people. They were related to the black people that we call the Khalifa that created California. And so my dream, my thoughts, my ideas are far beyond just what we have. But again, if I had 3 lifetimes of 250 years, I may get this on my 150th birthday. But Dr. Clark always said that, and he told me, Dr. John Henry Clark, great historian for those that may not know, he taught me and he said to me, he said, you know, you may not reach your destination. He was talking about a lifespan. He wasn't talking about anybody dying young. He was just talking about a lifespan. He said that, you know, you may not reach your goal in your life, but if you leave the proper roadmap, those that come behind you will pick it up and keep on your path where you were going. And that's this study guide. This study guide is a outline, an extended outline of all the work, all the lessons, all the books that I believe it's broken up into themes, not necessarily books, because we create book clubs, much respect to book clubs. But I'm a thematic person. I think thematically. For instance, my book, Shabaka Stone. In fact, we'll bring out my book so that you can get a better sense of what I'm talking about. My book, Shabaka Stone, is about African astronomy. It's about how our ancestors envisioned the world coming into existence. It's a very important document. The Shabaka Stone actually is the New Testament and the Old Testament combined. That's where the Bible came from Shabaka Stone. Okay? That's where Buddhism came from. That is where Rosicrucian, Zoroastry, came from. It couldn't have been Judaism because the letter J didn't exist until 1526. But what we call Hebrew came from that. But you know what's interesting? When you go to the Bible, I grew up Roman Catholic. Okay, I told you that. I was a choir boy. I was an altar boy. Would you believe I wanted to be a priest? Oh, my goodness. Dr. Clark fixed that. But when you read the New Testament, that basically is what you might consider to be Jewish history. The 5 books of Moses, basically, the Torah. And it comes in different forms. It comes in a written form, it comes in a vocal form, and it also comes in a form that's known as the Kabbalah, which is the spiritual essence of what we call Judaism. But everybody don't know about Kabbalah. It's the same way in Islam. You have something known as Sufism in Islam. Sufism is the spiritual African grounding of where Islam came from. Kabbalah is the spiritual African grounding of where Hebrewism, or what we today call Judaism, came from. Phenomenal faith system. In my book, Spirituality Before Religion, I don't have any problem with any religions. And I tell people all the time, they say, well, what religion are you? I say, well, I'm all of them because I'm African. And all religions came out of Africa, African spirituality. So if you ask me if I'm Jewish, I'm Jewish. I'm Christian. I'm Buddhist. I'm all of that. And I'm all of that because Africa is all of that. Fundamentally. And that's the way knowledge and wisdom is. But you know what's interesting about, they tell you the New Testament, but the New Testament came after the Old Testament because the Old Testament is the Amen priesthood. Because that's where you get Christianity from. Kares. That is why you have a pope. Because that was the Pharaoh. That's why you have the cardinals, because they were the high priests and priestesses. So what they did is they took our faith system and superimposed their mythology over it. And then in Judaism, that came out during Akhenaten's time, which now you're dealing with thousands of years after the Amen priesthood. And Akhenaten, his name was Amenhotep IV. He was an Amen priesthood, coming out of his father, who was Amenhotep III. And Amenhotep III and his wife, Queen Tai, that's actually where they get Solomon and Sheba from. And then Akhenaten's son, King Tut, is the story of Jesus. Now, I know I said a lot right there. And I know if you had told me this when I was 9 years old, I would have had a heart attack. But when someone tells a perfect lie, the truth is unbelievable. They stole the essence of who we are as a people. I heard there's a new word out called tether. And they tethered themselves to us and stole it and then claimed that they created it. The oldest Bibles in the world that you'll find, even the more current Bibles, comes out of Ethiopia. And long before there was the Book of Life, or what they call the Book of the Dead, there was an Ethiopian Book of Life. It was called Lefafa Sadek. Lefafasedek. Lefafa Sadek was the Book of Life that came out of Ethiopia, upon which was brought into Kush Kemet, that became the Book of the Dead, or the Papyrus of Ani. So that when you look at who we are as a people, when you look at, we want to bring this back down. I don't want you not to be a Christian no more. I'm not here to tell you don't be a Christian. I'm here to tell you to Africanize your Christianity. I'm not here to tell you don't be a Hebrew Israelite. I want you to Africanize your Hebrew Israelite. I don't want you to not be a Muslim, even though Islam came out of the mountains of Ethiopia, based in an African language. I don't want you to change, I don't want you to leave. Continue to celebrate Ramadan. Okay, what they say, Eid Mubarak. Celebrate it. But understand that's African. And so when you're fasting, what you're fasting, even in Christianity, you have the 40 days of Lent where you're supposed to fast. Right. Fasting was part of the African tradition. Fasting is a part of life. And so when you fast, what you're really doing is you're going within to bring out. You are not activating your digestive system in order for you to be able to take in the spiritual system, in order for you to be able to come to a mental state where you now have an entire, now in terms of Ramadan, you have now 11 months to prosper from what you did that 1 month of Ramadan. It's a beautiful idea. I don't have a problem with any of these religions. I have a problem with the interpretations because they're Indo-European and they're warped and they're contaminated. And any civilization that does not have the sister or the woman sitting beside her is doomed to fall.